Okay, everyone. I know people are still joining in, but I think just in the interest of time, we will get started. So, first of all, thank you everyone for connecting in. We are starting this AI for Social Good seminar series that is spans across multiple universities in Canada, Western, Waterloo, UBC, and also it's partially supported by a not-for-profit organization, International Center for Applied System Science for Sustainable Development, that's based out of Canada, but its sponsoring body is in India, in Agra. So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you. But today we have a very, very renowned and an eminent scientist and a researcher, Milind Tambe. And let me just briefly introduce Milind. Um, Milind Tambe is a Gordon McKay Professor of Computer Science and Director of Center for Research on Computation and Society at Harvard University. Concurrently, he is also the Principal Scientist and Director for AI for Social Good at Google DeepMind. Professor Tambe and his team have developed pioneering AI systems that deliver real-world impact in public health, for example, in maternal and child health, public safety, and wildlife conservation. He is a recipient of the AAAI Award for Artificial Intelligence for the Benefit of Humanity, AAAI Feigenbaum Prize, IGCAI John McCarthy Award, AAAI Robert S. Engelmore Memorial Lecture Award, Amos ACM Autonomous Agent Research Award, Informs Wagner Prize for Excellence in Operations Research Practice, Military Operations Research Society, RIS Prize, Columbus Fellowship Foundation Homeland Security Award, and commendations and certificates of appreciation from the U.S. Coast Guard, the Federal Air Marshal Service, and Airport Police of the Los Angeles. He's also a fellow of AAAI and ACM. To be honest, if I go through his CV, it will take me a full 45 minutes, so I will not do that. But I'm sure all of you can look up his profile. He's very well renowned and has done work that really makes an impact in the real world. And we are really privileged to have him give this inaugural talk. So, Milind, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Apurva. Thank you so much for this kind introduction. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for this AI for Social Good seminar series. And I'm so glad that all of you are so interested in this topic to be present. Um, to the extent possible, if you are able to not have your, not close off your video so I can see your reactions, that would be great. But if it's not possible, I'll understand. Thank
So,
you so
and
much.
and maybe I'll also add on, there's a lot of time for question, answers, and discussion at the end. So please, I think it's an important topic. And please, as Milind mentioned, have your videos on. He gets to see whom he's talking to. It's always an exciting, right? We do.
Yeah,
So thank you.
thank you so much. Okay, so with all that said, let's get going. So for the past 20 years, my team and I have been focused on advancing AI for social impact, focusing on topics of public health, conservation, and public safety and security, with the key challenge of how to optimize our limited intervention resources. And one lesson we've learned is that social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. Just to give you a quick overview of some of our previous work in AI for social impact, with respect to public health, we have large populations to serve limited number of public health resources. So concrete example is work we have done with youth experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. Harnessing the social networks of these youth, we are able to show that our influence maximization algorithms are far more effective in spreading HIV information and reducing HIV risk behaviors compared to traditional approaches. However, the social networks themselves are not known in advance and have to be sampled. And that's this point I was making about social impact and AI innovation going hand in hand. With respect to conservation, we have large conservation areas to protect limited number of ranger resources. Concrete example is work we've done in Uganda and Cambodia. We're harnessing past poaching data. We are able to predict where poachers set traps or snares, and for the past several years have been able to remove thousands of these snares. This work requires innovation in what we call green security games, which combines machine learning and game theory. With respect to public safety and security, we've contributed a new model, or Stackelberg security games, and contributed new algorithms based on this model that have been in use by security agencies in the United States, such as the US Coast Guard, the Federal Air Marshals, and others. If you've been on a US air carrier on an international flight, Delta, American, United, etc., whether there was an air marshal or not on your flight may have been our code that determined that if it was done after 2009. But today I'm super excited to talk to you about our latest work with bandit algorithms with the world's two largest maternal mobile health programs. The first is the use of restless bandits for a program called M-Mitra, which is based in Mumbai with 200,000 mothers enrolled at a time. A second is emerging and continuing work with collaborative bandits with a program called Kilkari, which is an all-India program where 10 million mothers are registered at a time. I will also talk to you about work with social networks for HIV prevention, which was done in Los Angeles more for diversity's sake. And then finally, I'll highlight how this whole process of AI for social impact could potentially be accelerated with foundation models and LLMs. And this is this idea of using meta-level agents that I'll discuss. To give credit where it's due, I'll show a photo of the lead PhD student where their work is done, shown in the top right-hand corner of the slide. All right, so starting with the maternal mobile health programs, the motivation here is the UN Sustainable Development Goal for 2030, that the maternal mortality ratio should be below 70 per 100,000 live births. That's mothers dying during childbirth or soon after should be below 70 per 100,000 live births. But where we are today in Western Europe and United States, the numbers are significantly lower than the UN target. But worldwide, if we look at the whole world together, the numbers are more than double the UN target. Our focus for this talk will be in India, where the numbers are rapidly declining, but still above the UN target. But I want to emphasize here, this is a global problem. As the former dean for our Harvard's Chan School of Public Health had pointed out, the maternal mortality ratio for Black mothers in states like Mississippi are 20 times worse than what they are in countries like Slovenia and Greece. So this is a global problem. And whereas I'll talk about India, we should understand that the lessons may be applicable in other parts of the world. We have been very fortunate to have been working with a nonprofit called Arman, which is a maternal and child care nonprofit, which is a large-scale nonprofit, works with 41 million mothers. In consultation with Arman, the first problem we worked with them on was this mobile health program called M-Mitra. It's a program for new and expecting mothers. Mothers register, and from the time they register to the baby being 1 year old, every week they will get a 2-minute automated health message of the form, for you and your baby to be strong, you need lots of iron, and then it goes on. Small snippet of an audio message that goes on for 2 minutes. And this is delivered in the local language with a jingle and so on and so forth. Over 3.6 million mothers have benefited from this program. So what happens is there's 141 messages that get sent to these mothers. And if they only listen to these messages, then Arman has shown through randomized control trials that compared to mothers who don't listen to these messages, there's a 30% increase in infants with tripled birth weights, increase in women who have more doctor's visits, and so forth. So significant benefits from this program. So where do we come in? Unfortunately, 30 to 40% of the mothers who register may become low listeners or entirely drop out of the program. Arman has this call center from where they can give service calls to the small number of service calls to these mothers to try to persuade them to not drop out. But this is a small call center which cannot call everybody. And that's where the resource allocation problem comes in. More specifically, we have a large number of beneficiaries, 200,000. Automated health messages, voice messages go to each mother every week. That never changes. However, we have this service call center from where we can give live calls to 1,000 mothers. And the question becomes which 1,000 out of 200,000 such that we maximize the total number of health messages that are listened to. To make this even more concrete, let's take this illustrative example. One health worker with 5 mothers under her care, 4 have not listened to a health message shown in red, one has, and they are shown in green. And now supposing this health worker has a budget of 2 calls only. And so she calls the first 2 mothers shown in red. They turn to green. There's another mother who turns to green, meaning starts listening. This is a great choice. Now again, next week with a budget of 2, who do we call? There are 2 mothers who are shown in red. Suppose we call these 2. Unfortunately, now these 2 shown in red do not turn to green, and those who were green also turn to red. So this didn't quite work out. The problem here is that there is a challenge in choosing the 1,000 beneficiaries to call. A live service call may not change a beneficiary state, whereas beneficiary states keep changing on their own. To choose the top 1,000 out of the 200,000, we turn to the restless bandits to prioritize K of n beneficiaries per week. For those who may not be familiar, in a restless bandit, each arm, in this case, each mother, is modeled via a Markov decision problem. So mother might be in a bad state. She has not listened to a health message, or good state. She has listened to a health message. We can take an action to do a service call, to intervene, or no action at all. And now we have modeled the probability, the behaviors of these mothers via this transition matrix. If the mother's in a bad state, and we give her service call, the probability of going to a good state is 0.8. But if she's in a bad state and we do not give her a call, the probability drops to 0.2. In reality, there's 200,000 mothers, so there's 200,000 of these arms. And we have to choose the top 1,000. This is a p-space hard problem. And the way generally these problems get solved is by computing what's called the Whittle index. The formal definition of it relies on giving subsidy to the passive action in a state such that its Q value becomes equal to the Q value of the active action. But informally, we can understand it as computing the benefit of the intervention. So we rank all the mothers in terms of how much benefit we would get from the intervening on them, meaning giving them a service call, and then pick the top 1,000. There isn't like an out-of-the-box algorithm to compute a Whittle index, but we had fortunately defined one in AMAS 2016 that we use for this purpose. But this algorithm requires that all the transition probabilities be known in advance. In reality, we actually don't know these probabilities, but what we do have is beneficiary data. For mothers who have gone through the program in the past, we have their features: age, income, education, language spoken, etc., and their engagement sequence. Mother was in a bad state, got a service call, transitioned to a bad state. Bad state, service call, good state, etc. So from there, we can learn a mapping of the features of the mother to a transition probability. If the mother is of age 26, income 5,000, education 8th grade, transition probability is predicted to be 0.3. So when a new mother walks in, we can make predictions about this mother's transition probabilities. And then, having got these transition probabilities, we can optimize to choose the top K mothers using the Whittle index that I mentioned previously. We call this a 2-stage approach because first, we work hard to maximize learning accuracy and then separately optimize to maximize decision quality. And then, of course, now it's time to evaluate the system in the field. To that end, we ran a study with 23,000 beneficiaries. They were divided into 3 groups: restless bandit group, round robin group, and current standard of care group. Remember, all beneficiaries every week always got an automated health message. Nothing changed there. What changed is who got a service call. We called 225 mothers per week for 7 weeks. This is basically pulling 225 arms per week. In the round robin group, we called the first 225, then the next 225 mothers, and so on. In the restless bandit group, we called the mothers who had the highest Whittle index that week. And now we want to know how much more listening was going on in each of these groups compared to the current standard of care, which didn't give any service calls. And here's what we see. Along the x-axis are different weeks. Along the y-axis is cumulatively how many more messages were listened to compared to the current standard of care. Orange is round robin. And we can see that there's hardly any improvement over the current standard of care. Blue is restless bandit. 600 more messages are listened to compared to the current standard of care. So what do we take away from this? It's important to optimize these service calls. If we just call people in a round robin fashion or a random fashion, we will not get any improvement in their listening behaviors. So, in fact, we can show that the restless bandit cuts by 32% the drop-off rate over current standard of care. Now, we wanted to show statistical significance of the results from our field trials. To that end, one of our students, Aditya Mate, went to office hours of our statistics department and asked them what test to run. And he came back saying they actually need to write their own paper about this because this is not a solved problem. So they wrote a paper to solve our problem and more general problems of this type. And then based on their results, we wrote a separate paper at AAAI. And that's how we were able to show statistical significance of our results, because evaluating these resource allocation algorithms in the field is not easy. We wanted to see, though, whether we can improve these results. And this is done by decision-focused learning. So far, I've talked to you about a two-stage approach. First, we maximize learning accuracy and then optimize. However, maximizing learning accuracy does not translate into maximizing decision quality. In fact, in many of these decision-making tasks, you may be asked to improve the predictive accuracy for public health or conservation and so on, so that we get better results. But in fact, that may not be the right thing to do. And I'll show this with concrete data from our own application. These are two data sets from Arman corresponding to 15,000 to 20,000 mothers. In data set one shown in orange, we have a high predictive accuracy. In blue, we have much lower predictive accuracy. We can predict the behaviors of the mother much less accurately in the blue set. Therefore, we would expect that if we were to give service calls based on orange, we would get much higher listening behaviors in the field. So we did give service calls to these mothers based on these two data sets. And here's what we find. Blue actually leads to much higher listening behaviors compared to orange. Why might this be happening? Here's some illustrative example. So along the x-axis is some feature of the mother. Along the y-axis is transition probability. Blue are all the low-risk mothers, and there's a lot of them in number. Red are all the high-risk mothers. And if I say, let's use a two-stage approach, we will learn this green regressor line, which great in terms of learning accuracy, but it doesn't give us the red high-risk mothers, low decision quality. Decision-focused learning modifies the loss function to directly maximize decision quality. So we learn this other green regressor line, which is a very low learning accuracy, but it gives us what we want. It tells us who are the high-risk mothers, and we can have a higher decision quality. More concretely, in the two-stage approach, we are trying to learn how to predict the MDP transition probabilities more accurately on average. In decision-focused learning, we don't care about that. We care about how can we improve the quality of our decision, which requires us to differentiate through the decision problem, through the Whittle index calculation. And for that, Kai was able to show that the Whittle index itself is differentiable. That's Kai Wang, whose PhD thesis this is all part of. More recently, Sanket Shah, in his PhD thesis, was able to show that decision-focused learning could be done without going through this differentiable optimization by learning the convex decision loss, etc. But in this deployed work, we focused on the work that Kai did with differentiable optimization. So we now ran a study with 9,000 mothers using decision-focused learning, 3,000 in the decision-focused learning approach, 3,000 in the two-stage approach, 3,000 current standard of care. If you looked at predictive accuracy, we would see that the two-stage approach has a higher predictive accuracy, more accurately predicting the mother's behaviors. However, if we looked at after we gave service calls to these mothers, along the x-axis are different weeks, y-axis how much more listening happened compared to the current standard of care. Decision-focused learning with restless bandits leads to much higher listening behavior, many more messages listened to compared to the two-stage approach. So decision-focused learning with restless bandits is the system that we've deployed. It's called Saheli. It's an acronym, but it also means friend in Hindi. This is just to tell you that we worked very hard to come up with this acronym. This has served over 350,000 mothers. It has been in continuous use since April 2022. It has prevented 30% of drop-offs in the system. For bottom 25 percentile of mothers who are listening very little, content exposure has more than doubled. They're listening to many more messages. So what does this mean in terms of actual health behaviors? So restless bandits lead to higher listenership. Does it lead to improved health behaviors? We ran a study with 21,000 mothers with matched intervention versus control. And here's what we find. For behaviors like taking calcium tablets after delivery, iron tablets after delivery, knowing more about the baby, there's a significant improvement in terms of these behaviors after intervention from our RMAP restless bandit system. So ultimately, this AI intervention is not only improving listening behaviors, but is also contributing to improving health behaviors. Dr. Hegde, who's the founder of Arman, points out that we are able to reach out to more and more women each week and get them back into the fold and save lives because of AI in this YouTube video. And Neha Madiwala, who's the research director at Arman, points out that this AI model has been very effective in identifying women experiencing exceptional difficulties, such as miscarriages. And then because these are identified early, Arman can point them towards counseling services. So I wanted to play a small video, which is an interview with one of the beneficiaries. I hope you can hear the sound.
मी तो फोन नव्हते ऐकत पहिला त्याच्यानंतर मला त्या ताईंचा कॉल आला त्या घरी आल्या मला समजवलं हा कॉल घ्यायला पाहिजे तुझ्या पोरांसाठी चांगला आहे हा मग तेव्हा मी कॉल घ्यायला लागले आणि ते कॉल ऐकून खूप बरं वाटतं की कोणीतरी घरचंच मला कोणीतरी समजवायला येतंय मग जसं ते कॉल ऐकते मी तसंच मी माझ्या पोरगीचं संगोपन करते.
So this is a mother in Mumbai where I grew up, speaking Marathi, which is also my mother tongue, and therefore having this mother benefit from our research is deeply satisfying. But there are many other applications of restless bandits that I wanted to quickly mention. We are working with a professor from the Harvard Medical School for allocating limited devices for monitoring vital signs in maternity wards in the Sembara Referral Hospital in Uganda and other hospitals in Uganda and Ghana. So there's limited number of these devices, who should wear them? And so it's a resource allocation challenge. We also know, for example, in tuberculosis, which kills 1.3 million people worldwide, patients are required to take these TB pills for 6 months. I get tired if I'm asked to take something for 6 days. 6 months is a very long time, and patients drop off of treatment. Similarly, in diabetes, people are supposed to take, log their meals and blood sugar and so on. And diabetes also affects 500 million people worldwide. So in both TB, diabetes, and other applications where there has to be some kind of adherence to health practices, people drop off of treatment, drop off of adherence. And we have limited number of coaches, call center workers who can call them to remind them, to nudge them to remain in the program, to not drop out. And so the question becomes, how do we allocate this limited resource? And restless bandits, we have shown, can be useful here. But the other aspect of doing work in AI for social good, and that's why we all love working in this area, is that it also is a treasure trove for new kinds of research challenges that wouldn't ordinarily come up. And so we've been working on many different aspects, such as online learning in restless bandits, generalizing using reinforcement learning for much more general restless bandit models, and many more topics. I realize that in the interest of time, I may not have, I'll come back to this later if there is any interest, but I'm going to skip some of these slides. So I'll just quickly go over one of these topics, which is online learning in restless bandits. So far, we've talked about taking data from the past and using that to learn transition probabilities. But what if we encounter patients and we try to learn about them online? And so some of you may be familiar with upper confidence bound algorithms for stochastic bandits. So in upper confidence bound Whittle, we maintain confidence intervals on the transition probabilities of each of the arms. But higher transition probability doesn't mean a higher Whittle index. So there's a quadratic program that computes the optimistic transition probabilities, which give us a higher Whittle index. And so now we know the Whittle index of each of these mothers. This is the optimistic Whittle index. We pull arms, meaning call mothers who have a higher Whittle index, and we repeat. So this is how we can do online learning. As I said, I'm going to skip over some of these other topics just in the interest of time. So key takeaway from this whole section. Restless bandits are useful for resource allocation in public health. In predict then optimize tasks, decision-focused learning is important rather than simply trying to improve prediction accuracy. And as I said, social impact and AI innovation goes hand in hand. I'm now going to switch over to a second topic, which is Skillkari, which, as I said, is the largest mobile health program in the world for maternal and child health, where 10 million mothers are enrolled at a time. This is a Government of India program, which is similar to Mitra, meaning mothers get calls every week, but it's a all India program and it's managed by our partner Arman. So I've gone to different villages to try to understand why mothers don't listen, why they drop out of the program. One of the challenges is that the timing of the call itself, the health message itself, is not done properly. So in Arman's case, in the Mitra, it's a smaller program. Arman notes down for each mother exactly when they want to listen to the audio messages. But in this case, with such a large population, they don't know exactly what's the right time to send the original audio message. And then, of course, if we can figure that out, but even after that, if a mother doesn't listen, maybe we can send health workers to their home or something like that. But I'm just going to focus on the first problem here, which is to identify when should we send an audio health message to a mother. And this is a national program where we don't get any information about the mother, no age, income, nothing. I mean, this is not available to Arman. None of this information is available to Arman. And so certainly not going to be available to Harvard or to Google. So here's the problem. For each mother, we want to figure out what's the right time to deliver an audio health message. So for mother number 1, 8 a.m. is a bad time to call her. She's not going to listen. 12 noon, not a good time. But 2 p.m., yeah, that's a good time to call her, and so on and so forth. So in the past, there was a smaller program done by Johns Hopkins to try to solve this problem by just calling these mothers at random, so-called retry algorithm. And there's no machine learning to improve pickup rates. They didn't think about a very large-scale application. And so what this means is this retry algorithm doesn't have learning that could improve pickup rates with retries. And it also, because there's no learning, you keep trying again and again, it consumes a lot of bandwidth. So could we improve upon it? And to that end, we used a stochastic bandit approach. So you can imagine that each time slot is like a bandit arm. And now pulling an arm is like calling in that time slot. And if the mother picks up, we get a reward. So This can be solved by standard algorithms like upper confidence bound. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to learn this beneficiary pickup matrix. For each mother, we are trying to figure out mother number one, 8 a.m. probability of picking up a call is 0.91. Mother number one, 9 a.m. probability of pickup is 0.82, etc. So you're trying to learn this whole matrix. Now, if you do this using standard upper confidence bound, there's a problem because we are treating each mother independently. And that means we are exploring too much. We're giving too many calls to learn this whole matrix. And this is inefficient. Instead, collaborative bandits can exploit similarity among mothers pickup behaviors by collaborating across arms. Remember, we don't have any features, so we are just looking at the data we have in terms of mothers' pickup rates and try to infer which mothers are similar to each other so that we can more quickly learn. And to that end, we are able to show that this matrix is approximately low rank, that is, mothers have similar behaviors. And so we can exploit low rank matrix completion algorithms. And again, this works without access to any real features. So how does this work? Supposing the real matrix is Z, beneficiary pickup matrix. We get some initial observations to populate our matrix. And then we can optimize to return an estimated matrix Z bar such that we find the low rank matrix that fits the observed data. Okay, so I'm going to again skip over some details. Please read our papers if you're interested in this topic in terms of how we can make this a robust low rank matrix completion, but I need to keep moving. We ran simulations first using data from the state of Odisha. Here we have along the x-axis mothers with different pickup rates. And along the y-axis, how many times did we try calling these mothers? Random is blue, higher is worse, lower is better. If we tried upper confidence bound, treat each mother separately and try to learn her pickup rates based on upper confidence bound UCB stochastic bandit algorithm, orange improves over blue, but our algorithm, which is collaborative bandits, improves the pickup rate even more. This is entirely in simulation. So the next thing was to try this in practice. So we did this in 2 districts in Odisha, Kalahandi and Puri. The 2 groups of beneficiaries that were recruited, 6,400 mothers per group. There are 3 weeks of pre-intervention calls, call them at random, and then use that to populate our matrix, and 2 weeks of then interventions, meaning in one arm, we will continue to call at random. In the second arm, we are going to use our collaborative bandit algorithm. And we want to know during intervention, when we use this collaborative bandit to determine pickup rates and then call these mothers, do we get any improvement in their pickup behaviors? We called 24,000 calls in each of the 2 groups. The random group got 24,000. The collaborative bandit group got 24,000 calls, roughly. So it turns out that bottom 7%, in terms of tiered listening, there were a group of listeners who never picked up the call, so we eliminate them. There's a group of listeners who always picked up the call, so we eliminate them to understand how much improvement did our algorithm really make. And here's what we find. For different time slots, we can see that there's up to 12% improvement in the pickup rates of these mothers. This is a small scale pilot test because we only tested for 2 weeks with a small number of calls. But these results are encouraging and telling us that we should now continue to push this work forward. And so again, so the whole summary here, you may encounter situations in your own research where you have limited data, you need faster convergence, and collaborative bandits could be helpful. We've done a successful pilot test, and our next step now is to trial in 2 different states in India. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get to a national deployment with the ultimate prize being a scale of 10 million mothers. But of course, this is going to be a step-by-step process. It's going to take months, if not a year or more, to get there. So we are in it for the long haul. I wanted to say that we've also worked with other nonprofits. For example, Help Mum in Nigeria to have AI-driven vaccination. So here, vaccination intervention optimization. So we wrote a model how to allocate resources so more mothers will take their children to get them vaccinated. We stopped after we built the model with our collaborators in Nigeria, but we were thrilled that they actually deployed the model. They reported the results back in AAAI 24, showing how vaccination rates had actually gone up in Oyo, Nigeria, with 13,000 beneficiaries. So let me now switch to HIV prevention in Los Angeles. So this is a problem where 10,000 youth sleep on the streets of Los Angeles every night. The rates of HIV among this population of youth experiencing homelessness is 10 times the rates of the normal housed population. So in order to spread information about HIV, shelters can't reach every youth, so they try to recruit peer leaders, educate them about HIV prevention so that they can talk to their friends and their friends can talk to their friends, and in this way information can spread. This is real face-to-face interaction. This is not happening online. So here's the problem. We have these different youth which are shown as numbers. Each edge is a friendship edge. And we want to pick key influencers, in this case, 3 influencers, let's say, such that we maximize expected number of influence nodes, those who get information about HIV prevention. And this is one of our social work colleagues educating to youth about HIV prevention from our actual work that we did. But when we started this work, there was at least a dozen years of work in computer science on how to spread influence, how to choose key influencers in a social network. When we started this work, we had no idea, though, that actual problem that we face is this. The social network itself is not known in advance. So somehow we have to figure out who are the key influencers without knowing the whole social network. This required Brian Wilder in his PhD thesis to figure out a new algorithm to sample the social network intelligently and then choose influencers such that the influence they spread will be comparable to the influence spread if we had known the whole social network. So Brian built his system. It was called Change. There's network sampling and then peer leader selection. We ran a study with 750 youth, 250 in the Change arm, AI treatment, 250 in degree centrality. Use the most popular youth to spread information. That's the current approach. And 250 in the control group, no influence spread, no information spread. And we want to know at the end of 1 month and at the end of 3 months, is there an actual reduction in HIV risk behaviors? And here's what we find. This work was done with 3 homeless shelters in LA. And in terms of reduction in condomless anal sex, which is one of the HIV risk behaviors, we can see that with Change, there's more than 30% reduction in this HIV risk behavior, but with degree centrality and control, there's no difference. At the end of 3 months, we can see that degree centrality begins to pop up, gets closer to Change, but Change is still superior. The fact that Change can cause this reduction in HIV risk behaviors faster is important because it is an HIV risk behavior, and because youth in this group come and go, which means that having them getting influenced faster is important. We also looked at other behaviors, reduction in condomless vaginal sex, and again, we can see that Change is superior. This is what our collaborator had to say.
Beautiful way to kind of like marry this tech world with this social service world, like, and how we can kind of go deeper and impact young people and elevate them.
So key takeaway from this section: if you are engaged in AI for social impact, lack of data is a frequent challenge, and handling it must be a key part of our research. The final part I wanted to talk about is accelerating AI for social impact. So for the past 20 years, as I've discussed here, we've been focused on optimizing limited intervention resources. And so Generally, a nonprofit or a government organization comes to us with some policy goal to maximize performance across all beneficiaries by distributing some limited resource, like limited number of HIV tests, for example. We talk to them a lot to understand exactly what is their problem definition, what are all the resource allocation constraints, and then we figure out what's the right AI model. Is this a game theory problem? Is it a bandit problem? Is it like a markup decision problem? And then having figured out the right match, we generate a policy. This is highly labor intensive. If you read our papers, the paper will say the NGO approached us with this very, very specific, crisply defined problem with partial observability and number of nodes and edges and so on and so forth. That's not true. We spent a lot of time eliciting exactly the problem definition. And then we say, okay, this is the exact model that solves the problem. That's not true. We spent a lot of time trying to explore many different problem formulations before we arrived at the right one. So all of this labor intensive process is what takes up time. And then of course, evaluation in the field takes up time. And so the question is, can we accelerate all of this? And here the idea is to use LLMs and other foundation models as meta-level agents in order to accelerate this process. I'm going to talk to you about only one aspect of this, given our limited time, which is how we can, let's say somebody like Arman, where we have already deployed a restless bandit model. If they now say we want to change our policy goals to maximizing performance, but prioritizing low-income mothers, rather than giving service calls across all beneficiaries who need them, let's prioritize more of the low-income mothers. Normally, they would need to come, Arman would come talk to me or our students to change something so that the policy now fits their changed policy goals. But instead of doing that, could an agent, a decision language agent here, automatically generate new policy for a changed policy goals? And that's the next step. So here we're using LLMs to shape restless bandit policy through reward design. So given a language command, prioritize low-income mothers, we take the restless bandit code base, feed that to Gemini. Gemini will generate different candidate reward functions. For example, R1 may double the reward if we are giving a service call to a low-income mother. R2 may give 20% more reward if we give a service call to a low-income mother. So then we run them through the restless bandit models to generate policies. We simulate these policies, and then we look at the comparison of these policies. For example, with reward 1, we are giving more service calls to high-age, high-income mothers. With reward 3, we give more service calls to high-age but low-income mothers. All of these are fed back to Gemini. And Gemini can then iterate and figure out what's the right reward to choose. We've done a study with 16 different commands in our NeurIPS paper where we have yellow, which is showing you a human being given these commands, and green, where LLM is given the same command to change the reward function. We can see that for simpler commands like prefer low-income mothers, prefer Hindi-speaking mothers, the LLM approaches what a human would do in terms of changing rewards and generating policy. But it turns out that if we go to more complicated commands, multi-objective commands, prioritize low-income beneficiaries and older beneficiaries, then it turns out the reward selection becomes unsatisfactory. To that end, our ICML paper recently generates a portfolio of policies rather than a single policy using these multi-objective commands. But since I'm hitting a 45-minute mark, I'm going to end it here and summarize. So, key points, I talked to you about restless bandits, being able to optimize resource allocation in public health. I focused on the world's 2 largest maternal mobile health programs, and I discussed the possibility of using the same for tuberculosis, diabetes, and other resource allocation challenges. Talked about social network sampling for HIV prevention, and then how we could potentially use foundation models and LLMs to accelerate AI for social impact. I'll end by talking about a few lessons we have learned in our work in AI for social impact. First, achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand, as I hope I have convinced you. We have to take a data to deployment perspective, an end-to-end perspective, rather than simply focusing on improving algorithms. As I talked to you, lack of data is a norm. It's a feature in AI for social good. In fact, in AI for social good, we often say it's a problem of low data, low resource, low compute. And we have to deal with these as first-class constraints rather than, giving up. Partnerships are important with nonprofits, governments, and local communities. In order to help these solutions to be adopted, it's important to integrate these AI innovations within their normal workflow. We don't want to be engaged in helicopter science where we go into a community, take their data, write a paper, and run away. This is the first challenge I faced when we started working with conservation agencies. I was in Uganda, and the first question they told us is, okay, you are going to take our data, as the previous research group has done, criticize the government of Uganda's conservation policies, and that will be the end of our collaboration. And I had to spend a lot of time to convince them that we are different. We are going to be here. We are going to work with you, and we are actually going to deliver a solution to improve the situation. And for computer scientists, it's important to step out of the lab and into the field and embrace interdisciplinary research. So that's it. Thank you all for listening to me. I really appreciate your patience. And again, thank you, Apurva, for starting this AI for Social Good seminar series. And thank you all for your interest in this topic. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Milind, for honestly a fantastic talk with a lot of work that really impact lives. That's really, really commendable. And I think it's remarkable how, as computer scientists, sometimes we cannot see or envision how we can actually impact the lives of individuals at the ground level. So, we have some time for question and answers. Anybody who wants to ask a question or has a comment, maybe raise your hand on Zoom so I can just go in that order. But I also have a very renowned academician, Professor Pammi Dua, who was the ex-director for the Delhi School of Economics in India, has also joined, and I would love to see if she has a comment or a question that she would like to make, because she is also involved in a lot of initiatives on community engagement and social good in the India front. So, Professor Dua, if you have any comment or question.
Thank you.
Thank you
I'm
very
very
much.
honored. Yeah, thank you for joining.
No, it's my privilege to attend your presentation. Wonderful presentation.
Thank
I
you.
just have a couple of suggestions.
Please.
How to increase the social impact. I think that's what we always worry about. We have the right intention, but how do we popularize our methodologies, and how do we reach out to the masses, and how to make the changes that we would like to make? So here I would like to give an example of a community based in Agra, India, which is Dialbag. And there are two things I want to highlight about this community, which I think would be useful for, in general, how to increase social impact. One is that it is based on a value system, very strong value system. So what is important there is all the values, beliefs, attitudes. We have ethics. Then spiritual consciousness is very important. Spiritual conscientiousness is very important. And this forms the foundation of all the activities that are done there. So if we can inculcate a value system, then I think that would enhance the impact of all the initiatives that you have mentioned. And if on top of that, we can also inculcate spiritual consciousness, which does not mean following any religion, it is just your own consciousness, then that can also expand the impact of some efforts. And the other thing that is novel about the Dialbag community is the community engagement. Because what comes with community engagement is shared responsibility. So you engage in the works together, and therefore you are also following the same philosophy, and you have the same objectives. and therefore it reinforces the efforts that are done. So if we can get communities involved, and you have mentioned that, then if you use a bottom-up approach, then communities would affect districts, would affect states, would affect the nation, and would eventually hit the global level. So I think if you start from the grassroots, that would really help to increase the impact. So anyway, I thank you for a wonderful lecture, and I thank you also for inviting me to attend the lecture. So thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you for your splendid comments. I'll take them to heart. Thank you so much for attending. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Professor Dua. So now maybe we have a couple of students. I know we have Ladan, a PhD student at UBC. Ladan, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your wonderful talk. It's really amazing. It got me a little bit sentimental about the moms using AI. It's really impressive how we can help actually having this health awareness among us in society. I just have two questions. First is, it's have you ever, like, your team has explored any I know like these are actively responding to health concerns and trends, but have you explored any using any AI solution, either LLM or to not only like respond to this health concern, but proactively like simulate, like optimize resource allocation in preventative health concerns? Like, not only we have the solution, but also based in this data, we can predict what would be the next concern.
So I guess I understand your question to be two-part. One is perhaps a chatbot type situation where the person can directly ask a chatbot about their health concern and the chatbot can respond. We haven't done that style of work. There are others who are doing that. Our focus has been very much on this resource allocation. I'm familiar with some of the early work that was done with health workers and so on. And it's a very high risk area. So one has to be super careful about the answers that are given and so on. But again, it's just not an area that we have focused on. Our work on LLMs has instead focused on how we can, accelerate the whole AI for social good pipeline. I gave you an example of how a human could command the deployed system to say, okay, we want to change priorities. And the system can change the reward function so that the policies are more in line with what the human wants. We've also done work on trying to build more realistic simulations in terms of responses to policies so that in the future, instead of running lots and lots of randomized control trials, which we did, we could imagine potentially even trying to reduce that, not to eliminate those, but maybe some of the policies that are not going to work, we can try to eliminate via these sorts of LLM-based simulations of people, the behaviors of people. So those are some of the things that we've tried with LLMs, but it's definitely a fertile area to think about chatbots and so on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And my last question is just about I know that in working in health sector is just about the sensitivity of the data and lack of the data, but have you, like, especially for the community in India, have you in any of this data contains any cultural clue to actually employ and accelerate this response? Because I think it might be a little bit of cultural education clue could be also not also the health data, but I'm just wondering if any of those kind of data has been integrated into your solutions.
When you say cultural data, what do you mean? Okay.
Like how they actually like respond to the solutions, or how they actually adopt to this solution rather than just replacing or automating this deliverable to them.
It's an interesting question, and maybe I can take this in a slightly different direction, which is maybe not exactly the question you're asked, but we have been focused on this idea of intertwining human and AI in the right way. What I mean by that is, in this case, the actual phone call that the health worker makes to these mothers and how she persuades the mother is done by a human. People have asked us, can you use an LLM to do that and so on, and we've resisted that. But rather, all the AI does is saying this is a good person to talk to because they would be persuadable and they can start listening again, but not exactly what to say to them or directly try to contact the mother. There's a human in the loop. And so there's the idea is to somehow divide the work between the AI and the human in a way that human expertise can be brought to bear, their cultural sensitivities can be brought to bear, their language, customs, and so on in the right way. And the AI doesn't interfere with that. And there's also an ethical component there because many of these mothers are in difficult situations. So when this, call center worker reaches out to them, this might be the only human being they may be talking to outside of their husband or something like that. And so that's where they may sometimes reveal difficulties that they may have. Maybe there's a domestic abuse situation going on and so on. And that's where a human can properly guide them. And so these are complicated ethical situations where this division of human and AI is important. Hopefully that
Yeah.
goes some way towards answering your question.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ladan. Maybe just in the interest of time, we'll have one more student. I want a student to ask questions because that's very exciting. So, Arsh, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. It was a great talk. It was super engaging and insightful. So I come from a background where I lived in a tribal area for 7 years, and growing up, I witnessed some challenges that people face in meeting even the most basic needs like food, healthcare, and education as well. So back when I was in 2009, there was no proper infrastructure to support patients with critical illness, and there was just one first aid center that was serving the entire area. And that's when a non-profitable organization launched a telemedication program. But today, with the rise of AI, it's essential that we harness it to improve for the social well-being, and particularly in those undiscovered areas. And I work in the area of human AI cooperation and human-centered AI. And one of the key questions that I ask myself, and I don't have the answer to that, is that how can the research we are doing in this space be translated and scaled in real time so that it doesn't stay in the paper or whatever the prototype we are building, but it reaches out the people who really need that. And I don't know.
No, that's such an important challenge, and I guess we struggle with that every time. But that's what I've been doing since 2006, is trying to figure out different ways of taking our software out in the field. And we've succeeded on many occasions, but we've also failed on some occasions where things didn't work, or so there are specific organizations which are AI ready who can benefit from our solution, and there are others where there are even more basic needs. I have talked to organizations who work in really extremely sensitive areas like trying to find lost children, and I can listen to them, to the organization, and they're doing amazing important work. But then they say we don't have any data, and I mean in that particular case it's like how do I help someone who has nothing in terms of data? And they say, well, first we have to go digitize all the archives or something. So that seems like a much more first, like you got to take those steps before AI can even come in. I've talked to wildlife conservation organizations where in some cases, like World Wildlife Fund, Wildlife Conservation Society, well-resourced wildlife conservation organizations, who have a digital infrastructure all ready to go on which AI can sit and immediately start helping. But I've also talked to organizations where they'll say, the boss is all AI ready and, wants to do AI. But you talk to the rangers on the ground and they'll say, we just need better shoes. So there are situations where AI is a good solution, and there are situations where we are not yet ready to deploy AI. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to develop specific questionnaires that we ask organizations ahead of time. There's like a growing list of 20 questions to say, okay, because people are enthusiastic about AI, which we are very grateful for, but it's not so easy. So for example, if they say, look, we can't give you any data, it's with us, but we just cannot give you any data, then it's like, okay, how's that going to work out for us if data is so sensitive and protected? I mean, in some cases, we can still say, okay, what if there's a small, you can only give us call records, you can't give us features. We can still work with you. But if you can't deliver anything at all, then how will we work? So there are challenges. So I guess I'm with you in saying that this is not an easy problem. After 20 years or so, we have some ideas on how to figure out which organization is a good one to work with, or which situation is a good one to engage with. But we haven't completely solved that problem. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Arsh, for a very good question. Honestly, I think we are in a journey. It's a long journey, but we need to be in the field, be on the ground, and work with the ground people and bring our technological innovations together, I think. And I think it was in one of the points Milind mentioned, right? It
Yeah,
all goes hand in hand, and
that's right.
that's our role. But anyways, in the concern of time, thank you, Milind, for the talk today, and let's thank him once again for taking time out of very busy and a very stressful schedule with all that's going on in
Yes.
Harvard. Thank you for
Yes.
taking
Yes.
time to deliver the talk, and thank you everyone for attending.
Well, thank you so much all for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Apurva.
Thank you, Milind. Take care.